Hello everyone, in this video I would like to show you my third Leaguestarter build for the upcoming Delirium League. I know that we don't have patch notes yet, but I want to give you guys some good content, so I don't want to rush making these builds in the last 3 days I'll have before the league starts. If there's any changes regarding this build, I'll mention it in the description and also change the PoE accordingly. This is an excellent Leaguestarter because you can pretty much do all the content in the game with fairly generic and easy to get gear. All of the footage that you are seeing in the video is done at Awakening level 8, and I'm using a Skeva and an Ansmite as my weapons, both of which are very cheap swords that will be available early on in the league. There is an incredible amount of room for improvement with this character as well, and I'll talk about some of the stronger options, so that if you want to make this build an absolute machine, you can do that. There's two main concerns with this build. The first one is that melee builds aren't the easiest characters to level with as a Leaguestarter, and I will talk about what you can do to make leveling easier on yourself. And the second concern is that if you want to take maximum advantage of this build, like play it to its maximum capacity, the gameplay is going to take some time to get used to, and it will also require some attention. For some people that might be more fun, like the engaging, rewarding gameplay style where you have like a lot of buttons to press, but for some others it might be boring, so keep that in mind. I have a couple of other Leaguestarter builds that you can check out in my channel that I've played very recently, and I will be making more builds as well, so if you are interested in that, stay tuned, subscribe to the channel. The PoE for this character will be in the description with some important notes for like the early league progression. I will quickly finish this map and like show you the metamorph kill as well, and then I will talk about the gear. Okay, so let's quickly go over the gear. As I've said earlier, there's a lot of room for improvement, and what I'm wearing is like very basic, so I will talk about your stronger options as well. For my weapons, I'm using a Skeva and an Ansmite. These are incredibly cheap swords that are pretty powerful for their price. These will be available early on in the league, so you can go for these first things first. This will pretty much like do all the content in the game. You can do everything with these swords. Obviously, like end game, if you want to invest more in this character, you can get like a very good rare foil and a savior, which will boost the character's damage and clear speed by insane amounts. Earlier in the video I've said that like leveling a melee character as a Leaguestarter is a rough process, and that's mainly because finding good weapons as you're leveling is kind of hard. One thing that you can do to make it easier on yourself is using this vendor recipe. You can sell a weapon and either a magic or rare rustic sash to a vendor, and also a blacksmith whetstone. This will give you that same weapon with the increased physical damage mod, as you can see. And then like you can do this as you're leveling to get like decent weapons, which will help you quite a bit. So while you're leveling, keep an eye out for rustic sashes and the blacksmith whetstones. Also keep in mind that if you use a rare rustic sash instead of a magic one, the recipe will be stronger, like the rolls that the item gets will be stronger. So if you can get it, get rare rustic sashes. You can also like use essences on a normal rustic sash to make it rare, and then do the vendor recipe, which is like a pretty good strat. We are using an abysses as well for like a really big damage boost. The abysses will increase the physical damage you take, but it really doesn't matter too much because we have a lot of defensive layers in the build. We're getting a lot of defense from the ascendancy. The champion ascendancy will give us a lot of like physical damage reduction and like less damage taken in general. We have like fortify effect in here. Fortify is in our main 6 link, so it's up all the time pretty much. We're using enduring cry for like the endurance charges. You can use your dread banner for like the fortify effectiveness. Your infused channeling support will give you like a less damage taken multiplier as well. We're getting a lot of armor from the gear and from the lion's roar, I'm sorry. So there's like a lot of defensive layers, so the abysses doesn't really matter too much in the end. For the body armor, I decided to go with belly of the beast. This gives you a lot of life and resistances and some armor. If you want to min-max the character, you can go for like a crit chest, an explodey chest maybe. There's a lot of things you can go for in here, like if you want to min-max the character. For like the first couple of days in the league, you probably won't have access to this. So farm the humility cards and blood aqueducts and get yourself a tabula rasa until you can afford this. For your amulet and your rings, you're looking for some life, resistances, and then finally physical damage to attacks. And I would also highly recommend looking for intelligence somewhere on your gear, because getting intelligence will save you some points on the passive tree. Since we are using an infused channeling support gem, we need a good amount of intelligence on the character. For your gloves, it's fairly simple. You're just looking for some life, resistances, and then maybe a damage mod. That damage mod can be either attack speed or physical damage to attacks. For like the late game, you want to go for a Hands of the High Templar with that third implicit, curse enemies with vulnerability on hit. This will be like a pretty good quality of life and damage boost while you're mapping. Until you get this, you can also get vulnerability on hit from your rings as well. so that might be something you want to look into. For your belt, once again, it's fairly simple. You're just looking for some life and resistances. Getting Stygian Vise is the optimal base because you can put an Abyssal Jewel in here for some like extra life, crit multi attack speed maybe. And then if you aren't going to use a Silver Flask, this is pretty much mandatory because you will get your Onslaught from here. For your boot, getting Tailwind boots would be amazing, of course. Tailwind gives you a lot of attack and movement speed, which definitely makes the build feel smoother. You won't have access to this for like the first couple of days in the league, but if you manage to get a Hunter Influence boot that is like item level 75 or higher, you can look for the Tailwind mod. So I guess that's it about the gear. Okay, so for flasks, Divine Life Flask of Staunching for the bleed removal, Diamond Flask of Feet for the freeze removal. This is always your go-to. Silver Flask of Warding for the curse removal. If you'd prefer, like if you have the Stygian Vise with the chance to gain an Onslaught on kill Abyss Jewel, you can replace the Silver Flask with a Basalt Flask, for like extra physical damage mitigation. But I really don't think this is necessary, so keep that in mind. And then finally a Lion's Roar, which will give you a lot of damage and survivability. So I guess that's it about the flasks. Okay, so for gems, we are linking our Cyclone with Infused Channeling, Impale, Fortify, Brutality, and then finally Pulverize. You will swap out the Pulverize for melee physical damage against bosses, because this will give you a little bit of extra damage. And I would also recommend looking for a level 21 Cyclone, because that will increase the radius of it, which will like increase your clear speed. Cyclone won't be available until level 28, so until that point you can use Cleave until level 12. At level 12 you can get Sunder, and then from like 12 to 28 you can use Sunder. I would also highly recommend using an Ancestral Protector as well to help with the damage. Early on for support gems, like most of the stuff won't be available, so you can go for Chance to Bleed, Maim, and then melee physical damage. This will be available at level 18, and these are pretty low level. While leveling, your 4-link for Cyclone will look something like this. Cyclone, melee physical damage, Fortify, and then Impale. We are using a Vaal Ancestral Warchief as well, of course. It's linked with Brutality, Ruthless, and then melee physical damage. This won't be available until level 28, so just use an Ancestral Protector until then. For our auras, we are using a Pride, Dread Banner, Blood and Sand, and then finally a low level Precision. Once you have access to like an Enlighten level 3 or 4, you can drop the Precision and use a Herald of Purity for like extra damage. We have an Enduring Cry as well to like generate endurance charges. And I'm also using a vulnerability linked with Trap. Since I don't have the vulnerability on hit setup like for like the early game, you can use this. The nice thing about this is that like you can throw the trap before like Conqueror fights, Cyrus phases, whatever, and you won't have to like actually cast the curse in the fight. So it's a bit of a quality of life. You can like self-cast it if you want. And then also we have a Leap Slam setup as well with faster attacks and then Calling Strike. Calling Strike will give it attack speed once it has like, some quality, so keep that in mind. And then finally a Blood Rage for some extra attack speed and Frenzy Charge generation. And for the end game, once you change your weapon from like Scavia, while you're using a Scavia, you have to get like all green gems. So I wouldn't recommend re-rolling this weapon for like red gems, but once you get a different weapon, you can also go for a cast 1 damage taken setup with like Steel Skin or Immortal Call. And finally, for the last gems of the build, I'm using a Blood Magic linked with Summon Scatter Bots in my offhand weapon, because of the First to Strike and Last to Fall Ascendancy node, which I will talk about in a little bit. But that's it about the gems. Okay, so for the passive tree, we are playing Champion. Champion gives us a lot of damage, survivability. It makes it so that we don't have to worry about like accuracy and capping our chance to hit because of these two nodes. And then finally, this is something very important to talk about. As I've said earlier in the video, there's things you can do to like maximize the potential of the build, which are like kind of hard and require attention. This is one of them. First to Strike, Last to Fall, this Ascendancy node will give you Adrenaline whenever you reach low life. Adrenaline is like a big survivability, damage, and clear speed boost. You can trigger this yourself by using a Blood Magic and an Aura in your offhand. As you can see, I'm using a Blood Magic linked with Summon Skitter Bots. The way the rotation works is that you will quickly swap your weapons, use the Aura, which will like reserve your life, which is like basically reaching low life, and then you will quickly swap back and then use your life flasks. And this will give you like Adrenaline for 20 seconds. Once you get used to this like playstyle, it really isn't hard. Like you can use it between packs and maps. You can use it before bosses. But if you don't want to like bother with this playstyle, you can drop this and then just go for this. This will be like a bit of a damage and clear speed like, reduction overall. But once again, it's like preference. If you want to play to its max capacity, go for this. Also, one more important thing to note here is that this will give you Intimidate. So if you are going to drop this, I would recommend using a Belt of the Deceiver instead of the Stygian Vise, because this will replace the Intimidate that you lose from this Ascendancy node. So keep that in mind as well if you want to swap it out. For your jewels, there's quite a bit of things you can get, like physical damage, attack speed, crit multi, Here's basically what you're looking for in jewels. If you want to like min-max the character in terms of like jewels, you can go for the Watcher's Eye, which will give you like chance to deal double damage while using Pride. You can also go for the Impale Watcher's Eye, which is pretty expensive, so depending on the budget and how much you want to invest, keep those in mind as well. Other than that, the tree is fairly typical. I will just let you take a look. In terms of like progression you want to take while leveling, you want to start out with the attack speed nodes because that will make your leaf slam feel smoother in the early stages of the leveling, which is pretty good. Go for like the Master of the Arena, dual wield nodes, and the life node in here. 18 points. 34 points are going to look something like this. Go for some damage in here, area of effect, and the impale effect. 64 points is going to look something like this. You're going to go for the sword nodes, some life, and go for like the sword nodes in here. From like level 12 to 18, since you'll be using Thunder, you can't use Thunder with Sword, so keep that in mind. Don't rush for the Sword nodes on the passive tree. And then at 89 points, it's going to look something like this. You're going to invest more into like crit stuff because getting crit early on isn't really a good idea. You're going to get more crit, get some life. So that's pretty much it. Like you can fill out the rest. In terms of like ascendancy progression, you're going to grab this first, Worthy Foe second, and then depending on what you want to go for, as I've said earlier, go for these like from your Uber lab, pick whichever you want. Anointment options, Tenacity is your best bet because this will give you some life and a lot of damage, but it requires 2 golden oils, which is why I went for ambidexterity. This will give you just about the same amount of damage, and it also gives you some attack speed, which makes the build feel smoother. You can also consider going for like Blade Dancer early on if this is cheaper. For Pantheons, big one, you can go for whatever you want. And for like the small Pantheon, you're going to use Soul of Shikari while mapping for the poison immunity, and then Soul of Rislatha for the flash charge sustain. Okay, so I guess that's it about this character. At the end of this video, I will talk about some like gameplay tips if you're not sure how these skills work and interact with each other, so check that out as well. I stream on twitch.tv/ErvoErgo, so if you want to come chill with me, ask me some questions, feel free to stop by as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, so the biggest tip I can have for you is like using your weapon swap properly. If you are going to use this, you know, as I've said earlier, you're going to weapon swap and then use an aura. Like rotation shouldn't take more than a second, and once you get used to it, it really isn't hard. You can do it like between packs and maps. You can do it before the boss encounters. Quickly swap weapons by pressing X. Bind your aura to like a comfortable keybind. Use your aura and then swap back quickly. After you swap back, you want to quickly like spam your life flask 2 times, which will like pretty much get you at full HP, and you will get adrenaline. Other than that, you know, you're going to be swapping your blood and sand, like depending on what you're doing. While you're clearing the maps, blood and sand will give you a lot of area of effect and like reduce your damage. And against single targets, you will swap this to like blood stance, which will give you more damage and less area of effect. And finally, you can also like use your dread banner as well. Once you like put this, actually like use it again, like this will place the banner. And once you place the banner, it will give you like a lot of fortify effectiveness, which is quite a bit of survivability. So if you feel like you're going to die, you can make use of this. While you're mapping, you know, obviously use Enduring Cry to keep your endurance charges up. Like before bosses and whatnot, you can use your Wall and Ancestral Warships, which will give you like a lot of damage. Other than that, until you have like a vulnerability on hit from some of your gear, maybe your gloves, your rings, as I've mentioned earlier, you'll be using a vulnerability with Trap or self-cast. I would recommend using traps. You can like throw the trap before Conquerors, High Risk, whatever, and that will curse the enemy. Other than that, I'm not sure if there's any more like gameplay tips. Just use your aura carefully, like weapon swapping. Don't do it in the middle of a pack. Use these carefully as well. Like make sure that you're on the right stance. Let me know if you have any questions. You know, I will get back to you as soon as I can. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one.